If you're working in HR, you've heard the term neurodiversity, but what does it really mean? In this video, I'm breaking down the real basics of what neurodiversity means and what in HR we really need to know about neurodiversity at work. So let's get started with what is neurodiversity. So neurodiversity is a term that is attributed to Judy Singer and was first brought in to talk about the difference between when she was talking about those who are autistic and those who are not, and that range of human brains. So now we hear it talked about more in terms of that whole range of human brains, everyone being different. We are by our nature diverse. And so neurodiversity is like the catch-all term that is kind of explaining everybody, explaining the uniqueness and that rich value that comes with everybody being different. What we mean when we're talking about those who are, say, diagnosed with ADHD or are autistic, are dyslexic, dyspraxic, among many others, is that they are neurodivergent. So we have within neurodiversity, we have two terms really that get used a lot. One being neurodivergent, which is all of those people who are either self-diagnosed or diagnosed with a neurodivergent condition, and those who are neurotypical. Now, as I say though, every brain is different. We're all individuals. It's not just, oh, this is one group, this is the other group. These are all these brains that look the same, and these are these brains that look the same. That's not how it works. It's not like that. We are all individuals. We are different. Those who are neurodivergent are those at the moment that fit within the diagnostic criteria within the DSM of neurodevelopmental conditions. That's generally what most people are talking about when they say neurodivergent. However, there's not a agreed terminology or definition. So many people will include wider ranges of mental health conditions. So depression, anxiety may be in there. For some, Alzheimer's will be in there as well. So there's a whole range of things that people might be talking about when they're talking about neurodiversity. To a certain extent, it doesn't really matter in HR exactly what we're talking about and which conditions, because the principles remain the same for everything that we're dealing with. It's just a case of understanding individuals. But I think when we understand that these definitions are quite wide in terms of how people use them and roughly what they mean, certainly that difference between neurodiversity, which is everyone, and neurodivergent, which is those that have a condition, a neurodivergent condition, and that those two, to differentiate between those two, is really important. So if the current research numbers are correct, we have about 80% of the population who are neurotypical and about 20% who are neurodivergent. The research shows that those who are neurotypical tend to have a closer, so that group, that 80%, tends to be more consistent in terms of what you would expect people to look like, how you expect them to present. Their challenges and weaknesses tend to be narrower, so they tend to be more consistent in their performance. Whereas the neurodivergent group, that 20%, whilst there's a number of different conditions in there, so ADHD, autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, among many others, there is a consistency generally of the Spikey profile within that. And the Spikey profile being that people have some really strong strengths and some really strong challenges as well. And it tends to be which of those challenges you've got, which identifies which of the conditions that you fall under. We also know through research now that co-occurring conditions is very common. In fact, to only have one is rare. And we are starting to see research that says you're most likely to have traits of all of the neurodevelopmental conditions if you've at least met the diagnostic criteria of one. So there's new research and ideas are changing around what neurodivergent conditions look like. And this is why in HR it's so important that we talk about individuals and we focus on individuals rather than a label, a diagnosis. So what we can't do is go, right, this is our package for those who've got ADHD and this is the package for those who've got dyslexia. It doesn't work like that. We need to look at individuals. And that brings us on to how we look at neurodivergent conditions in HR and changing some mindsets around what we do. So for those of you that have not come across it before, I'm going to introduce the idea of the social model and the medical model for considering disability. And the medical model is what we generally use in HR. Traditionally, we've used in HR. So the medical model being very focused on diagnosis, going to a doctor to get support, to get healed, cured, which is not what people are looking for who are neurodivergent generally. But the medical model is very much around providing medical evidence that you need adjustments. And the Equality Act is largely based around the medical model. Now, the Equality Act definition of a disability doesn't require a diagnosis, so it doesn't insist that we fall into the medical model, but it is largely written around that basis of impairment and the substantial impact on everyday life over a long term. It's really based around that medical model. And that traditionally is what we've done in HR, and we've sent people off to occupational health, which again is a very medical model. They are medical professionals. And so we send them off to occupational health to get advice and support. Now, within neurodivergence and looking at the neurodevelopmental, and we can look at many other disabilities in the same way, we can use the social model. And the social model is saying that it's not the impairment that disables somebody, but it is their environment, it is society that disables them. And in this model, we're looking at somebody who can be more or less disabled depending on the environment. And we know that there are ways that people who have neurodivergent conditions can build their life around them, supports they can put in place, they can structure their environment that works really well for them, and therefore minimises how disabled they are. And the same thing applies for people with physical disabilities as well. If we put in place ramps, for example, we reduce the impact of somebody's disability if they are a wheelchair user. So when we look at how do we adapt the environment, how do we adapt the way that we support somebody, that we work with somebody, how we manage them, how we be a colleague with them, all of these things, then we are reducing the impact of a disability. And that's what the social model says. And I'd like to see organisations moving towards that social model. And that's where you get the business benefits. That's where you get inclusion, when you've got that social model of disability, because you're looking at it not from the point of view of, oh, you've got this diagnosis, therefore you're the problem, but you're looking at it from the point of view of what can we do to enable people to thrive in our business, and then you get the real business benefits that come with neuroinclusion. And it's those business benefits that is why neuroinclusion matters so much at work, and why we in HR really should be taking this seriously. 63% of employers surveyed who have implemented neuroinclusion in the workplace saw business benefits, not just with things like employee well-being, employee engagement, retention, although they did see those things, but they saw improvements in the bottom line. So things like productivity, they saw improved customer service, they saw improved creativity and innovation within their teams. So the wide-ranging business benefits come from being inclusive. So looking at that social model, rather than just saying, oh, you've disclosed this, we now need to send you off to work out what reasonable adjustments that you need. But we're looking at how do we create an environment in which people can thrive and which we get the strengths. We talked about at the beginning of this video, that spiky profile. So the real strengths that come with being neurodivergent, as well as the real challenges. And it's those real strengths, if we can harness those in the business as well, that we can really benefit from, as well as just being person-centric. So when we train our managers to understand neurodiversity, we gain the benefits of person-centric management. So we gain from our managers the ability to be able to look at each individual within their team and adapt their style to support that individual to thrive. That makes stronger teams, it makes stronger leadership, with all the benefits that that brings to any business. So what is it in HR that we really need to be doing to get this right? Firstly, education, training. So training for HR teams. Businesses showed that as soon as they trained their HR teams, they started to see the benefits of neuroinclusion. So getting HR teams trained, not just to understand. So it's not just having somebody that can come in and talk about, oh, this is what ADHD looks like, this is what it feels like. And that is really beneficial, don't get me wrong, but it needs to go beyond that to real practical, what is it that we can put in place that will support and enable people to thrive? What can we change within the workplace? That's what you want to be coming out of any training with. And then training should also go to managers, so that they know how to adapt their management styles, think about individuals within their team, and be really inclusive within their management. And then that will enable you to be looking at policies, practices, procedures, all of the things across the business, as well as the environment, and looking at, is this inclusive? How do we engage people who are neurodivergent so we get their feedback as well, their input, so we make sure that we're creating environments that are really inclusive. If you want to know more about the really practical things you could be doing right now to support those who are neurodivergent within the business, download my free guide. That gives you some really practical hints and tips for your neurodivergent hire, and to check out this video, which will give you more on supporting those who are neurodivergent in the workplace and creating neuroinclusive environments.